And I would be moderating this panel simply because I've not worked personally with the NAACP president for the Wharton County chapter, but just about everyone else on this panel, I have worked with them, and because of them, I'm smarter.
That's a nice thing to say.
What we're gonna do, I'm gonna allow them, and let me say, this is a community panel. That's why I say I've worked with them. Worked with them in some form, in a different capacity, or I've even just gone to some of their training programs, which has been so helpful for me. And for me, what I could tell you something about every last one of them, because working with them, I've learned to not only embrace them as individuals, but to embrace their backgrounds. So that's why it's so important that we get to know someone up close and personal before we decide how we're gonna react to them. So I thank every one of them. Specifically, I'll start with Lou. Boy, did it take a minute we worked this thing. And I'll let you introduce himself. I'll let Lou introduce himself. He's been instrumental in creating training for Harris County sheriffs, as well as HPD in the area of the LGBT community. Lou.
Good morning, everybody. Do I need the mic? I just want to make sure we have accessibility here. Thank you. Good morning. My name is Lou Weaver. I live in Houston. My pronouns are he, him, and his. I am a queer transgender man, and so what I do is talk about LGBTQ folks, specifically around transgender folks, gender identity, gender expression. Back in 2013, I did help the Harris County Sheriff's Office update their policy to take care of the inmates that they're housing, but also to cover their employees under sexual orientation and gender identity. And then during the past year, we've been educating the Houston Police Department on specifically transgender topics, and I've worked with Christina Garza from the FBI to do a training with the FBI, because this is an often misunderstood community. Not everybody knows that they know a transgender person, even if they do or not, because a lot of us are very scared to even come out, because it is still legal in this great state of Texas that I can be fired for being a transgender person. I can be denied housing for being a transgender person. My friends over here that were on the panel earlier were saying, you have to go through extra hoops to prove of why I was being fired, and proving extra things that I didn't conform to the stereotypes of what I was supposed to do. So that's what I do for my community. So I talk to anybody who will listen to me, and I'm not an attorney or a doctor, but I just like to talk a lot. So. Thanks, yeah.
And second, we have LULAC. I worked with him years ago down in Waller County. Yeah, down in Milstead Independent School District. We had a situation there, and he and I provided services. We did training, and we did a lot of stuff down there.
We did a lot of stuff. Kim is awesome. And I've been in LULAC for over 40 years, still in college when I joined LULAC, and my passion has been civil rights. Although my background is law enforcement, I work with the prisons. Matter of fact, I was one of the guards that had the Bird, one of the ones that killed Mr. Bird. He was in the Ramsey unit under my supervision in administrative segregation. I also work with the probation department. I'm retired from there, Harris County Probation. And but my passion is advocacy, civil rights, which I do with LULAC. And we have built passages to the different departments, to the police department, to the DA, district attorney, Kim Augie, is awesome, the police chief, and the sheriff. And we've been very fortunate in that we've had good people. And it's very important to build good community relationships with your people in positions of authority. Because when people come to you for help, you need to be able to have the access to be able to talk to them on a one-to-one basis and trying to get their assistance. So that's what we do. LULAC is over 80 years old, and it's primarily its primary goal is education and civil rights. And to that end, I believe that we are the biggest Hispanic organization in the United States and the oldest as well. So there we we are. Thank you.
And go ahead. Next we have is Dr. Jamal. I began working with her as we put on protecting places of worship, resident expert. I learned more than probably what I wanted to learn, but I learned it anyway. So that's how I began my relationship with Dr. Jamal.
Thanks, Kim. So I'm Zahra Jamal. I'm Associate Director of the Boniuk Institute for Religious Tolerance. We're part of Rice University. Our mission is the study and advancement of religious tolerance through research, education, and engagement. Through the Institute, we also sit on something called the Houston Coalition Against Hate, which is a network of civil society organizations that have come together to understand and address issues of bias and hate in Greater Houston. I'll just mention a couple of things, and then the others we can discuss in the Q&A. So some research that we are working on right now, we have a project on combating and understanding and combating hate speech online, and we're working with the Baker Institute for Public Policy and also the computer science folks and other civic members. Through the Coalition Against Hate, we have recently hired a researcher to help us understand the landscape of what constitutes bias and hate around Houston, what community-based organizations are doing in response, the kinds of resources that they're providing to local communities, especially those that may not report to federal agencies or state agencies, and what some of the gaps are so that we can work together to try to fill some of those gaps. We do other things in education and engagement, and I'll speak to those later in the panel.
Well, I met ADL when I started my career here with the Department of Justice Community Relationship in 2012, but I didn't meet Ms. Marks until probably we played phone tag for quite a while. I think that's how we met, through phone tag. But I tell you, this is an awesome organization, and she's been, after I finally twisted her arm the 9th time, she says, I'll be on the panel. But she's been, the agency, well, what did it say, agency or organization?
Agency.
Agency has been helpful with me as I prepare for different programs to get information regarding hate statistics. And as a matter of fact, here's another shout out. I will be attending a training with ADL Extremists. Is that November the 13th? Maybe she'll
November the 13th, but the FBI is actually the organization that's putting it on.
There
We're just
you have
helping.
it. Oh, okay. So that's a shout out again. But go ahead and talk about what you do.
Well, I after you outed me, as far as my reluctance to be here, I just want to thank District Attorney Middleton and the Queen of Shout Outs, Kim, and the Citizens Engagement Committee for including ADL in this, because I don't know about the rest of you, but I've been with ADL for 20 years and I learned a lot today already. So I'm really grateful to be here and to have been able to benefit myself from some of the things that I've learned today. ADL is an anti-hate organization. We like to say we were founded 106 years ago with $200, 2 desks, and a 2-part mission, which was to stop the defamation of the Jewish people and to secure justice and fair treatment for all citizens. So we're an anti-hate organization for everyone because immediately our founders determined you cannot fight one type of hate without fighting all types of hate. So I'm lucky to work with Zahra on the Houston Coalition Against Hate and work with really everybody here in fighting hatred. We work with the NAACP, we work with LULAC. We've certainly had the benefit of Lou helping us with things. So I'm really in an august group, I'd like to say. We fight hate proactively and reactively. One of the ways we do it proactively is with the Houston Coalition Against Hate. We have No Place for Hate in a bunch of schools in our region. And then reactively, I spoke about a little bit earlier, which is that we have analysts all over the country who will follow haters and extremists and provide information on that for you. When I get a chance in a little bit, I'm going to show you how to find our heat map, which will give you some information on that and a way to look at where hate is around the country. But now I'm going to turn it over to my friend from the NAACP.
Again, I just met her this morning. But they said you had to have her. this program could not go on without her. But certainly, I've worked with NAACP in all parts of the country where I do my work. As I told you, I'm responsible for Texas, Arkansas, Oklahoma, Louisiana, New Mexico. Well, there's NAACP in all those states. So I'm trusted that she will give us the type of information we'll need. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Ms. Reddix.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Lynette, and I'm the past president of Missouri City and Vicinity NAACP, and currently I reestablished the Fort Bend, Wharton County NAACP, where it's a historical chapter. NAACP on hate crimes, they have a national opposition against hate, assault, and threats to equity in regards to hate in our country. We promote and improve hate crimes training, data collections to develop hate crimes reporting online for the hotline. And locally, we work with any organization to just improve the access and make sure that we don't despair against any cultures. So 1909, NAACP was established in New York City with African Americans and white individuals. So we're here to stay. We're one of the oldest and largest civil rights organizations in the country.
So I'll
And
start.
also ask me.
Oh, okay.
I'll refer to questions as we go.
Okay. I'll start with our first question. Certainly, if you feel you want to ask a question, feel free to raise your hand. Our first question, I'll start with this. What has your communities experienced with being targeted or victimized as a result of what you may consider a hate crime or a perceived hate crime? We want to go this way? Okay.
For my community, it's police brutality. It's been a strong issue in our community, as well as pipeline to prison. And that's been one of the issues that our community faces daily.
Well, since we're an anti-hate organization for everybody, I think someone referenced this earlier, that there's been a 17% increase in the number of hate crimes according to the FBI statistics. But I do want to mention that hate crime statistics, and this has been mentioned earlier too, are severely underreported. I went back and did a little bit of research, and while there has been an increase in the number of law enforcement agencies reporting to the FBI, they're still, we think, underreported. We were talking earlier about, how do you figure that out? Well, one of the things that I looked up was the National Crime Victimization Survey. This is a survey that's done twice a year of crime victims. And from 2004 to 2015, there was an average of 250,000 hate crimes reported per year. But if you look at the FBI's hate crime statistics for 2015, it says that there were 5,815 single bias hate crimes. That means reported because of one type of bias, and 32 multiple bias hate crimes for a total of 5,847. So there's a huge discrepancy between 5,847 and 250,000. So definitely we need to educate the public more about reporting hate crimes, and we need to educate law enforcement about how important it is to report hate crimes, because all the FBI does is get the statistics. It's the law enforcement agencies that report to the FBI, and it's individuals who report to their law enforcement agencies. So one of the things we're trying to do is to get people to report hate crimes more. I can talk more about that in just a second. You can see a visual representation of hate crimes reported to ADL, and ADL also has a vehicle for reporting hate crimes, which is adl.org, our website /report incident. But I want to, sorry to take so much time, but I want to show you this visual representation. So if I may put the mic down for a moment or pass it on to Zahra. If you will all take your phones out and go in your search engine to adl.org, adl.org, or look up in your search engine
ADL heat map. That's what you should do. Look up in your search engine, ADL heat map. And it will take you to a page for the heat map. Everybody getting there? And if you scroll down, you will see a map. You get on that page, scroll down, you will see a map. Now on a phone, everything's going to be a lot closer together than it would be on a desktop or a laptop. But you should see something like this. I don't know if you can see on my screen a map of the United States with lots of circles on it. And those are places where we have determined that there have been incidents of hate, extremism, anti-Semitism, or terrorism. So we collect this information, we provide it to the public, we provide it to law enforcement, and it's very important to increase the reporting of hate crimes so that we can see trends and try to prevent future crimes from happening. I'll stop there. Sorry.
Thank you, and thank you for the work that y'all do, both ADL and NAACP, as well as my other colleagues on the panel. At the Boniuk Institute, we really focus on issues of the religious dimension of life, people of all faith and no faith. And what we've seen in the data coming out of ADL, CARE, SPLC, FBI, DOJ, you name it, is a rise in hate crimes specifically against certain religious communities or those perceived to be part of it. So about a 60% rise in anti-Semitic incidences and about a 20% rise in crimes that are targeting Muslims. And this is coming out of the federal FBI data from 2017, so the actual statistics are probably much higher because a lot of folks don't report, as we've mentioned. There are also attacks against those who are perceived to be Muslim but are not, so especially Sikhs and Hindus who may dress in ways that others may believe them to be Muslim. And I want to mention that the kind of discrimination that we see, sometimes it's verbal or physical or aggravated assault, but it's also not just of adults in the workplace or in public spaces. It is also in the classrooms against our children. And it is perpetrated not just by other children, but also by teachers, administrators, staff, and others. So this is, and it's at double the rate. If you look at bullying against children on the basis of religion, for Muslims and for Sikh children, it is more than double the rate of the national data on bullying for the average American child. And so this is part of the ethos, the context that we are dealing with and trying to respond to through the Institute's work in research, but also in education and engagement, which I'll speak to in a few moments.
Thank you. Although LULAC is not a research organization, so I don't have numbers to show you as to the uptick of racial crimes. It's just a perception that there are a lot of the rhetoric coming out of Washington has been very negative. It's called us all kinds of demeaning names, and also it called us invaders, called us all kinds of different names. And that, as we saw a few months back, where there's a crazy individual went and shot 22 or killed 22 people and injured 24 others in El Paso, because he was, he was going to go after the Mexicans there because he felt they were invading. And a lot of the rhetoric coming out of Washington, he had on his website. That, as well as other cases. There's a lot of cases, even here in Harris County. We've handled some where individuals, white individuals, feel empowered to, kind of enforce the law. I had this individual, he Hispanic, and he was a lawyer. And so he went to a post office after hours, 9 p.m., and there was nobody else there. He was just gonna check his mailbox. So he parked in a handicapped area. So along comes this guy and confronts him because he was parked in a handicapped area. And and the white guy claims that Mr. Garza put up his hands like he was going to fight him. So the individual took out his gun and shot him dead because he was parked in a handicapped area. And nothing would have happened because there was no activity until the family came to us, to LULAC. And we got on it, we got to the police chief, we spoke to the district attorney, and finally, the individual was indicted. And about 2 months ago, this individual was sentenced to 25 years 20 years in prison. But he's 70, so chances are he won't come out. But that's the kind of thing we're confronting. There's the John Hernandez case. John Hernandez was, you probably heard of him, he was the one that was murdered by the husband of a sheriff's deputy outside of a Denny's restaurant. Because this individual, he was intoxicated, and instead of going to the bathroom there at Denny's, he went outside to a parking lot and was urinating. And this other guy comes, and then he confronts him and winds up putting him in a hold. By the way, the guy was an MMA fighter on his spare time, and choked him until he died. Even though the family was there, his little girl was crying, says, "Please don't kill my daddy." Yet he continued, and his wife, the deputy, came to the scene because she wasn't with him originally, and instead of stopping him, stopped the people from trying to stop him or trying to block people from filming it. This individual was given 25 years in prison. And the thing is that it probably wouldn't have happened if we hadn't come and advocated for this family. Because in fact, they weren't going to do anything about it. It was all about protecting the sheriff's deputy and her husband. So these are the kind of things where individuals feel empowered to attack minorities, specifically Hispanics, because of the negative rhetoric coming out of Washington. And we're addressing this kind of issues. And there's a lot more. I don't want to take all your time. But,
Okay, well, that'll be good. We'll just go to the next one.
So my community has a long history of being ignored and being beat up. If you don't know the reason we have a pride parade in June of every year for the LGBTQ community, it's because of the Stonewall riots, where the cops were going in frequently and just pulling queer people out of a bar and beating them up and taking them to jail for the weekend. This is our 50th anniversary of that. And so queer people decided to rise up and fight back and say, I'm tired of being pushed around because I'm other. And also queer people belong in all of the intersections of everybody else that's in this room. And after Matthew Shepard was murdered, and then we have a hate crimes law, it's important to note, though, that in our state, the hate crimes law only covers sexual orientation. It does not cover gender identity like it does at the federal level. So when we see transgender women being murdered or harassed in this state, there's nothing that our local officials can do. There's not nothing, but it's a very limited thing for a hate crime. We have to involve the FBI if there's reason to. Right now, what transgender women that are living in the intersection of race and poverty and the misogyny and sexism that goes with all of that, transgender women of color are dying at an unprecedented rate across our country. And a lot of it we don't know if we didn't know before, if it was underreported or misreported because of using the wrong names and the wrong pronouns. Last year, we lost 26 transgender people across the country that we know of. All but 2 were Black. One was a Latina woman and one was a white male. And these are trends that we are seeing over and over again here in the United States, and they continue to go up. We had an incident in Austin where this was at the beginning of 2015 where a trans woman of color was murdered, but it took 4 days for the police to report it correctly. So in those 4 days, they lost a lot of clues, they lost a lot of access to figuring out what was going on because the cops and the media reported that a Latino man had been murdered. Thankfully, when we got Chief Acevedo in Houston, he realized we knew before then that there had been a problem. We had had a panel in Austin to talk about some of these things, including the Matthew Shepard Foundation, which focuses on hate crimes against gay and lesbian and bisexual transgender people. Were there. And so Chief Acevedo knew that we needed to do something about this. So he started we have LGBTQ liaisons within the HPD, and he started training all of his officers. And that makes it somewhat easier, but we can't put it on my community. I am one guy. And as much as I like to say I know everybody that's queer in Houston just because I want to, I don't. So in order for me to build a bridge, I need somebody coming from the other side. And that is HPD, their LGBTQ liaisons, their hate crime officers coming to our events as well, including Harris County Sheriff's Office, because if anybody's incarcerated at the county level to city level in Houston, they're going to Harris County Sheriff's Office. So we need to make sure that we know somebody who's safe, because a lot of people were not reporting hate crimes. In fact, they closed down the storefront in the Montrose area, our neighborhood. And before they did that, we met with the officer that was running that, and he's like, oh, it's totally okay to be gay anymore, right? Nobody cares. Like, I wish that was real. I really do. But before transition, as I was starting my transition about 10 years ago, I was being called a dyke so often. I hadn't been called a dyke since the late 80s. So it is coming back. I'm hearing all this rhetoric, and to be honest, if I didn't have a purple beard right now, nobody would acknowledge me. I'm not visibly trans. I am not the type of person that somebody is attacking. But I did live in Houston during the Houston Equal Rights Ordinance fight, where they said no men in women's restrooms. It was scary to go out in public, right? Where am I supposed to access a public facility? And to be clear, they're not targeting people like me on the most part. They're targeting transgender women and my non-binary siblings who don't fit into society. So hate crimes are happening. They're happening every day at all different levels. And language matters. And so sometimes it's somebody yelling at us, calling us bad names. Sometimes it's somebody blocking access to a fitting room or a restroom out there, or it is a murder. And we are right now, Texas is being called the murder capital of the United States for transgender women of color, because we've lost 4 this year, 2 in Houston and 2 in Dallas.
So one of the issues, I'm hearing that you believe there has been an uptick, but yet there's been some underreporting. What could you tell the members in the community about the importance of reporting, or what they can do with regards to reporting?
I can answer that.
Dena,
Yeah.
Well, there's several things you can do. First of all, it's very, very important to report hate crimes. You are if you're the victim of a hate crime, you're 4 times more likely to have to go to a hospital. Victims of hate crimes suffer from some of the most vicious attacks, because you're attacked for who you are, not for how much money you have or some other reason that someone might attack you. And so these crimes are very vicious, and we need to report them, and we need to prosecute them as hate crimes so that we can deter them from happening. And as was explained earlier, the way the hate crime laws work generally is that they will add extra punishment to a crime that's been proven to be a hate crime, and that's meant to deter hate crimes. We also need to make sure that everybody knows that hate crimes exist and hate crimes happen, to try to deter them, to try to educate people about them. So that's very, very important. There are several ways you can report hate crimes. Certainly, as has been encouraged before, report them to law enforcement if you feel comfortable with that. If you don't feel comfortable with reporting to law enforcement, there are other ways you can report hate crimes. You can report them to ADL. Like I said, you can go to adl.org/report-incident. A form will come up. You fill out that form. We will keep your information confidential if that's of concern to you, and we will try to help you deal with whatever happened. If we believe that you are in some sort of imminent danger, of course, we will encourage you to report to law enforcement. ADL also has a memorandum of understanding with the government of Mexico and the Mexican Foreign Ministry. And we have a campaign called Denuncia el Odio, which is designed to get people who are reluctant to report to law enforcement to report to their Mexican consulates across the country. So you can report, if you're from Mexico, certainly you can report to a Mexican consulate, and they will help you deal with it. We are about to kick off a huge campaign to get people to report hate crimes and hate incidents. We're going to be kicking it off in the next couple of weeks. You'll see billboards that say expose hate with our website, with that reporting URL. And we just are so strongly want you to do that, because it's going to help everybody if you can do that. So look for that. We're working with Art Acevedo on that. with a bunch of other organizations. Kim mentioned the event that we're working with the FBI on, which is also part of that. One of our analysts, Vegas Tenold, here's a book he wrote called Everything You Love Will Burn. He's coming in to be a part of that. So stay tuned for that. But there are plenty of ways you can report hate crimes, and thank you for asking that question.
Does anyone else want to address that? Do any of your other organizations allow you opportunities? Okay.
If you feel that hate crime has been perpetrated on you and you're not getting a response from the police department or sheriffs or whatever, come to your advocates, anyone here.
Yeah.
LULAC, ADL certainly, and everyone here. That's what we're there for. We have built inroads with the district attorneys, with the police chiefs, the sheriffs and all that. Come to us, we'll address your case.
Did you want to respond? Oh, okay. Okay, I have another question. Are there anything in particular that you believe law enforcement should know about your religion or your community that will enhance or make the engagement a little more pleasant? Does anyone want to address that?
I can see. Do you want to go first?
Okay, based on our religion, and I can't speak for everybody, but most of the community that I serve, they don't trust the police. They don't trust in men. They trust in God. They trust in their own faith. They don't believe that the police will protect and serve them adequately. So the trust issue is not there, but to engage them positively, it has to have a better understanding that when you're stopped as an African-American youth, they're already afraid of you. So the interaction that I have taught my boys, be calm, speak clearly, and don't jitter. Well, that's not been targeted to other races. So we have to train our kids on how to interact before they're in middle school. And so that's the issue that our community faced, other than any other culture, that we believe that the faith is not there in our system and in our police. So we just have to continue to nourish that engagement and communicate adequately on, hey, the trust factor. So if they're coming at you wrong, you just have to talk clearly and softly and don't raise your voice and don't react because you could lose your life.
So I can't point to one specific thing because there are so many that need to be shared. But I think here it's important to understand and to note that we are, as civic organizations and as universities, working with law enforcement, with Department of Justice, et cetera, to help train law enforcement and community policing agencies. I have worked with the DOJ on the curriculum on American Muslims and how to work with that particular community in this country. And then also working with them, with DOJ and other federal agencies on ways that we can all protect our houses of worship. Unfortunately, a variety of houses of worship have been attacked not only in this country, but also in others, and I think that's really important. The other side of it, I think, especially where folks may feel uncomfortable or have grievances that they want to report in their places of work. I've also been training chief diversity officers, the C-suite, vice presidents, et cetera, on the importance of worldview diversity at the workplace. And by having that kind of information and understanding ways in which you can engage your employees on that basis will probably, I think and hope, would quell some of the challenges and discrimination that individuals may face, and also help to adjudicate some of these cases before they come to the courts. I'll stop there.
Did anyone else want to address it?
Go ahead.
To law enforcement, in dealing with the Hispanic community believes in the rule of law. And, but, one thing that will lose you the trust of the Latino community is if you try to be a nice agent as well as an officer and, use your position to address an agenda of immigration or whatever, that'll sow mistrust. And the thing is to sow trust within the Latino community, if possible, learning something about the community, perhaps even learning Spanish. You know, you never know. And, you know, if you treat people with respect, then they will treat you with respect.
Thanks. I would say when we're talking about diversity, it can't just be the color of somebody's skin. That is one place to start, but that is not the be-all, end-all. And people of color are many different colors other than black and brown, and we have to be thinking about this. And that is important to my community because we're in the intersections of all of those communities. But for my community, it really matters on how you address them. And law enforcement officers frequently say, oh, I have to use a legal name. Do you? Like, really? Do you? Do you have to write a report with a legal name? Absolutely. But does that mean that's how you address somebody? Not necessarily. And it goes a long way in how you talk to people. So to have a transgender 101, and that is what I do for a living. I want to come talk to you and teach people how to get away from saying that just because it says Michael, is that what you're going to call somebody is always Michael? How many Michaels do you call Mike? How many Elizabeth do you call Liz or Beth? How many people use a middle name, initials, or have Americanized their name because they've come from a country and we refuse to learn their name because we're lazy, right? Y'all can say Daenerys Targaryen, I promise you, right? If we can learn this, we can learn how to treat transgender people and people from all over and call them by the name that they tell us that they use. And it's not my preferred name, it's not my preferred pronouns. I prefer vodka over gin, right? I use my pronouns. It is not my sexual preference, it is my sexual orientation, it is my gender identity and my gender expression. And the other thing is, it is important to note that every single person in this room has a sexual orientation, every single one of us has a gender identity, and every single one of us has a gender expression. So my community doesn't belong over there, we all belong right here, and we all need to figure this out, and we all need to learn how to talk to each other, like Augie said, with respect. Because I see so many people who are afraid of going to the cops because cops will say, well, I have to call you a man because that's what it says on your ID. Like, that's a trigger. That's a hate crime. That's abusive. And I no longer want to talk to you. Or they tell my community, well, you deserve it. Look at the way you're dressed. I get a lot of words for that, and none of them are nice, and none of them I can say on this microphone, right? And so we've got to get to a place where we understand, and I will guarantee you can never understand a transgender person because you don't have to live my shit, right? And I can't understand yours. But we can respect each other for our differences because even though our differences, we're a lot more alike. And so we have to learn about communities that are different than us.
Alrighty. So how do you believe, each of you, the panelists, believe that you can help partner, what do you believe is most crucial for your community to partner with law enforcement to bridge that gap, that lack of respect that someone has thrown out, the lack of trust? What do you believe that your community can do to create that space?
Well, I think it's all about communication. So when you adequately communicate with your community leaders and the people that work with you alongside you, we want you to know that we respect you as well. So we want to come to you openly. We want to engage our members of our organizations to open their arms to such belief that we can live together in unity, even though we don't see that, but we actually can, but we have to have the communication effectively so that people don't lose faith, because that's what's happening.
I have to say, I second that motion. I think it's all about cultivating relationships. This particular event is a wonderful step in that direction, but it's all about cultivating relationships. You cannot, it's hard to hate somebody if you really know them and you understand them, so cultivating relationships.
The only thing I'll add is also providing the skills or some of the tools that could be used in managing the knowledge and the relationships that you've built, and then the common values behind it, especially of respect, compassion, generosity, etc. And I'll also just mention quickly that in addition to doing that with law enforcement and other agencies, it's important to start that with our children. Because when they grow up to be big people, we don't want for them to be in these kinds of conditions as well. And so I think this kind of education really has to start young, and we do offer support in that sphere.
I think as advocates out there in the community, you have to cultivate your contacts. We have frequent meetings with the police chief whenever there are issues, or, just perhaps we meet once every 2 months. We just gave Kim Augie an award for her great work that she's been doing. And, you have to build relationships with law enforcement, with the district attorneys, with the sheriffs, with the police chiefs, and all that. Because if you do, that will reward you when you're addressing a case, that they will help you.
Two things. One is, don't wait for us to come to you. You can come to us. There's plenty of community events that are going on, whether it's also marching in the Pride Parade. Next month is Transgender Awareness Month. Get involved with your community. There's events that are happening, or invite us to you. Because the only reason I'm gonna knock on your door is if there's a problem. And we don't wanna wait for that. So let's not play defense, let's play offense, and try to find ways, and don't put it all on us, right? Because it's so hard that sometimes the hierarchy of needs for me is not necessarily saying, hey, we need to work on housing. Right now, we're working on like, how do we make sure we keep people alive and get them the medicine they need? There's just so many issues going on. And also I really like cops. I'm the child of a cop. I just also want to put that out there. So I have a unique understanding of what it's like when you don't wear the badge, but not everybody has that privilege. And I didn't get that until a few years ago. I thought everybody grew up thinking, oh, the badge is good. Yeah, no, I mean, so we have to get beyond that. And I don't know how, it's gonna be all this talking and training our kids that, there's a whole other way that we can live, and we're just not there right now.
I want to now open it up. Are there any questions? Yes, sir.
Yes, first of all, I came here with the idea just to get a gathering of understanding of where we were with hate crimes. And I'm sort of puzzled that there was no conservative panelists out here. This is all very left-wing, and it's liberal, and that's okay. But I have to say, I don't think you're speaking for the entire community, for sure. Now, personally, my feeling is, I'm opposed to homosexuality, so my guy on the right there, with all due respect, I don't see a drag queen in my neighborhood. I don't care for that kind of thing. And very honestly, talking about young people, you're right, it starts in the home. The children, it starts with families. And anybody in this room you better know that. It starts in the home. And don't sit there and talk about the community, the police department, and how radical they are. You know what? I respect the police department. I respect law and order. That's what it's about. But going around here and creating some sort of an idea that Latinos are being bashed on, I don't necessarily agree with that. I mean, do not agree with that. There are people in this community that support minorities and raise them up and treat them just like white folk. I'm from Texas. I was grown in Texas, and by golly, that's where I'm gonna be.
Well, sir, I certainly appreciate your opinion, and it's well respected and well taken. And this portion of the program was by no means created to offend anyone here. And I say to you, I apologize if you felt offended. That's not the purpose. What the purpose is for allow these people in the community to talk about things that have happened to them within their community. So, and again, I certainly respect.
I'm in this community also.
Yes, sir. And in the future, I will get your contact information and allow you to serve as a panel member. Thank you. Yes.
I would just like to point out that every single member of the community was invited. Every chief of law enforcement was invited. Invitation was extended to everyone. This distinguished gentleman mentioned we're treated like white folk. We are human folk, all of us. So it's not human race, one beating heart. We're all here together, and I think we're all trying to say the same thing. And I think sometimes things get lost in translation, but I want to re-emphasize the fact that everyone was invited. When I say something, I mean it. And every single person, the county was invited. Every head of law enforcement was invited. Not only were they invited, they were encouraged to have their staff come as well. I'm not saying they didn't come for any reason. They could have conflicts in schedules. There's other things that happen. People have children. People have life. Stuff happens. But I just want to stay on the message here that it's one human race, one people, and I believe that all of us, again, are saying the same thing. Everyone to be treated equally, everyone to be treated fairly. I didn't interpret this as a criticism of law enforcement. However, you're open to your opinion, and I respect your opinion. I really do. And that's what this message is about. Respecting everyone, hearing everyone. Not everyone is right. Everyone has an opinion. And this is a forum for us to voice our opinions. And so everyone feels like they're heard. And that's it. That's all I wanted to say. I wasn't trying to address a rejoinder. I just a clarification.
And at this time, in the interest of time, and all due respect to everyone's time, we're going to conclude this portion of the panel. I want to thank everyone for your participation. And at this point, I'd like to turn it over to Sherrod and Mr. Bryan to bring out closing remarks. And the shout-out queen has 2 shout-outs. I want to give a shout-out to Fort Bend County District Attorney Fort Bend County Judge Tony Wallace. Thank you. And at the back table, we have information that was put together by the Victims Assistance Coordinator. Some of it is in Spanish, and if you find something that's not in your native language, the DA's office has assistance through other nonprofit organizations that we can get it translated in that language. Again, thank you.
Okay, again, I'd like to thank everyone for participating. For our viewers out there, thank you for tuning in. This is very important. What we're teaching here today, sir, is tolerance. That's what today is about. We won't tolerate hate. We won't tolerate prejudice in our community. If you haven't noticed, the community has changed. It's grown. This is a very diverse community, and everyone must be respected in this community, even if it's ideological. We don't have to agree, but we must tolerate each other. We must tolerate our differences. And our laws must be followed. And we as law enforcement will ensure that, regardless of color, you will be protected in Fort Bend County.
I just want to wholeheartedly support those comments. At the Department of Justice, we are committed to the prosecution of hate crimes. Look, nobody wants any crime to occur, and when there's a hate, there's an additional aspect of it. We will not tolerate it in our community. A hate crime occurs, please contact your law enforcement representatives, and we will get working. Thank you.